A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You ever notice how some books just seem to follow you around? You see them on the shelf of a high-powered CEO during a video call. Then you see a battered copy in a backpack on the light rail here in Jerusalem. And then you hear a military commander quoting it in a briefing. There is one text that has managed to stay relevant for over 2,500 years, and it is not a religious text or a work of poetry. It is a manual on how to destroy your enemies.
Herman Poppleberry here. And you were talking about the big one, corn, Sun Tzu, and the art of war. It is funny you mentioned that because our housemate Daniel actually sent us a prompt about this very thing the other day. He was looking at his bookshelf and wondering why a bunch of scrolls written in ancient China during the spring and autumn period are still considered the gold standard for everything from Silicon Valley startups to modern geopolitical maneuvering.
It is a great question. I mean, the world has changed a bit since the era of bronze swords and horse-drawn chariots. We have moved from physical terrain to digital market share and cyber warfare. And yet, the principles seem to hold firm. Today, we are going to deconstruct why that is. We are going to look at the man, the myth, and the actual mechanics of the text. We also want to look at how it compares to more modern strategic frameworks, because strategy did not stop evolving in the 5th century before Christ.
It is a foundational piece, but it is not the only piece. We have to talk about the OODA loop in modern strategic theory too. But to understand the branches, you have to understand the root, and the root is Sun Tzu, or, more accurately, the group of people we call Sun Tzu.
Right, let us start there. Because there is some historical ambiguity, is there not? Was Sun Tzu even a real person, or is he more like a composite character of military wisdom?
That is the big debate among historians. Traditionally, he is identified as Sun Wu, a general who served King He Lu of the state of Wu around 500 BC. There is a famous, and honestly pretty brutal, story about him training the king's concubines to prove he could turn anyone into a soldier. When they laughed at his orders, he had the king's favorite concubines executed to show that discipline is non-negotiable. It is a dark start, but it established his reputation for absolute clinical efficiency.
It is a chilling story, but it sets the tone for the entire work. Whether he was one man or a collective, the voice of the book is incredibly consistent. It is clinical, it is cold, it is completely focused on efficiency. It does not care about the glory of battle or the heroism of the individual. It cares about the objective. And I think that is the first reason it resonates so much today. It treats conflict as a system to be managed, not a drama to be performed.
That is a perfect way to put it. It is a mental operating system. We talked about this a bit in episode 1030 when we looked at Stoicism. These ancient frameworks work because they focus on the things that do not change: human psychology, resource scarcity, and the logic of competition. Sun Tzu's core thesis is basically that war is a matter of vital importance to the state, the province of life or death, the road to survival or ruin. Therefore, it must be studied thoroughly. He was the first person to really codify that strategy is a science, not just a feeling you get on the battlefield.
And the most famous line from the book, the one everyone quotes even if they have never read it, is that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. That feels almost counterintuitive for a military manual. If you are a general, is your job not to fight?
That is the common misconception. Most people think strategy is about how to win the fight. Sun Tzu says strategy is about how to make the fight unnecessary. If you have to move your army, if you have to spend the gold, if you have to lose the men, you have already lost something, even if you win the battle. The most efficient victory is the one where the enemy realizes they cannot win before the first arrow is even shot. In a modern context, that is, deterrence. It is what we see in high-stakes geopolitics. If your position is strong enough and your resolve is clear enough, the conflict never moves into the kinetic phase.
It is like that old business saying that the best way to beat the competition is to make them irrelevant. You do not want a price war. You want a product so superior or a brand so dominant that the other guy does not even try to enter your space. But to get to that level of dominance, Sun Tzu lays out what he calls the 5 constants. I wanted to dig into those because they feel like the actual architecture of his system.
They really are. He says you have to evaluate any situation based on these 5 factors: the Tao, heaven, earth, command, and doctrine. And if you understand these better than your opponent, you win. Period.
Let us break those down into modern terms. Start with the Tao. In the text, it is often translated as the moral law.
Right. In the ancient Chinese context, the Tao was about the people being in complete accord with their ruler. If the people believe in the cause, they will follow the leader into death without fear. In a modern organization, that is mission and culture. If you are a CEO and your employees do not believe in what you are doing, or if you are a political leader and the country is deeply fractured and cynical about the mission, you have a Tao problem. You cannot execute a complex strategy if the fundamental unit of your organization, the human being, is not aligned with the goal.
That makes total sense. You see that in failed corporate mergers all the time. The spreadsheets look great, but the cultures clash and the mission gets lost, and suddenly the whole thing falls apart. What about heaven and earth? Those sound very literal, like weather and terrain.
They are literal, but they are also metaphorical. Heaven is the climate, the timing, the seasons. In business, that is the market cycle. Are we in a bull market or a bear market? Is there a sudden technological shift, like the rise of generative artificial intelligence that we saw explode in 2024 and 2025, that changes the environment? You cannot control heaven, you can only time your actions to coincide with it. Earth is the terrain. It is the distances, the danger, the security, the open ground versus the narrow passes. In modern terms, that is the regulatory landscape, the supply chains, the physical and digital infrastructure. If you are launching a startup and you do not understand the earth, the actual ground you are standing on, you are going to get caught in a narrow pass and ambushed by a bigger player.
I love that. So heaven is the when, and earth is the where. Then you have command and doctrine.
Command is the leader. Sun Tzu says the commander must have 5 virtues: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. Notice that he puts wisdom first. It is not about being the bravest or the strongest, it is about being the smartest. And doctrine is the organization. It is the rank and file, the logistics, the management of costs. You can have a great leader and a great mission, but if your logistics are a mess and you cannot get the supplies to the front line, you are done.
It is a holistic view. It is not just about the moment of impact. It is about the entire system, and it leads into his obsession with information. He famously says that if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat.
And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. That is the one that gets people. Most organizations actually have a very poor understanding of themselves. They have blind spots. They do not realize their own weaknesses. This is why we talked about red teaming in episode 893. You have to actively try to break your own plans to see where the cracks are. Sun Tzu was the original advocate for that. He was all about the cold, hard assessment of reality. No ego, no wishful thinking, just data.
Which brings us to the most controversial part of his philosophy, deception. All warfare is based on deception. When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. This feels like the part that people find the most distasteful, especially in a world that claims to value transparency.
It is distasteful if you think of it as lying for the sake of lying. But if you think of it as managing the enemy's perceptions to minimize cost, it is just smart. If I can convince my competitor that I am not interested in a certain market, they might leave it unguarded. Then I can move in and take it before they can react. I have won without a fight. In the world of cybersecurity, this is the whole concept of honeypots and obfuscation. You are creating a false reality for the attacker to waste their resources on.
It is a very proactive way of thinking. You are not just reacting to the world, you are actively shaping how the world perceives you to gain an advantage. But there is a flip side to this. If everyone is using Sun Tzu and everyone is trying to deceive everyone else, does it not just lead to a sort of strategic gridlock?
That is where the modern updates come in. Sun Tzu gives us the foundation, the static principles. But in the 20th century, we started to realize that speed and adaptation are just as important as the initial plan. This is where we have to talk about John Boyd and the OODA loop. Boyd was a fighter pilot and a military theorist who was often called the 21st century Sun Tzu.
I remember you mentioning him before. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, right?
And while it sounds simple, it is incredibly deep. Boyd's insight was that in any conflict, the winner is the one who can cycle through that loop faster and more accurately than the opponent. If I can observe a change, orient myself to what it means, decide on a course of action, and act on it while you are still trying to figure out what happened in the first step, I have gotten inside your OODA loop. At that point, your actions are no longer relevant to the actual situation. You are reacting to a world that no longer exists.
That feels like a direct evolution of Sun Tzu's ideas about speed. Sun Tzu said that rapidity is the essence of war, but Boyd takes it a step further by making it an iterative process. It is not just about being fast once, it is about being faster in every single rotation of the decision cycle.
Right. And the most important part of Boyd's loop is the orient phase. This is where you take the information you have observed and filter it through your heritage, your culture, your previous experience, and your mental models. This is where Sun Tzu's 5 constants live. Your orientation is your Tao, your understanding of heaven and earth, your commanded doctrine. If your orientation is flawed, your decision will be flawed, no matter how fast you are.
So, if Sun Tzu is the map, Boyd is the engine. You need the map to know where the terrain is, but you need the engine to navigate it in real time. It is a powerful combination. But I also want to bring in Richard Rumelt here, because he has that great book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. He argues that most of what people call strategy today is actually just a list of goals or fluff.
Rumelt is essential for anyone who thinks they are being strategic because they have a mission statement that says they want to be the best in the world. He says that is not strategy, that is just a desire. A real strategy, according to Rumelt, has a kernel. It has a diagnosis of the challenge, a guiding policy for dealing with it, and a set of coherent actions.
That sounds very much like Sun Tzu's clinical approach. Sun Tzu does not say we want to be the greatest empire. He says the enemy is in this position, the terrain is this, our supplies are that, therefore we must move this way. It is a diagnosis and an action plan.
Rumelt points out that bad strategy is often a way of avoiding the hard work of making choices. Real strategy is about saying no to 100 good ideas, so you can focus all your resources on the one point where you have a decisive advantage. Sun Tzu calls this the power of focus. If you are everywhere, you are nowhere. If you try to defend every point, you are weak at every point.
This is something we see in modern politics and geopolitics all the time. The temptation is to try and be everything to everyone, to project power in every direction at once. But a truly strategic player, whether it is a country or a corporation, knows that you have to choose your battles. You have to find the narrow pass where your specific strengths can overwhelm the opponent's weaknesses.
Let us look at a case study to make this concrete. Think about a hostile corporate takeover. In Sun Tzu's terms, this is a siege. Now, Sun Tzu hated sieges. He said that the worst policy is to attack walled cities. Why? Because it is incredibly expensive. It takes months to prepare, and by the time you win, your army is exhausted and your treasury is empty. In a modern corporate context, a protracted hostile takeover battle can destroy the very value you are trying to acquire. You spend millions on legal fees. The target company's best employees quit because of the uncertainty, and the brand gets tarnished in the press.
So the Sun Tzu move would be to avoid the siege entirely. You would use deception or diplomacy to win the board over before the public battle even starts. Or you would position yourself so that the merger seems like the only logical path for their survival. You win the company without destroying its value in a fight.
Precisely. You are looking for the path of least resistance that leads to the greatest gain. But there is a danger here, and this is where we get into the second-order effects. If you become too obsessed with these strategic frameworks, you can end up with institutional rigidity. You start following the manual instead of looking at the reality in front of you.
I have seen that. Organizations that get so caught up in their OODA loop speed that they stop questioning if they are even heading in the right direction. They are just acting for the sake of acting.
Right. They are fast, but they are blind. Or they use Sun Tzu as a justification for being overly aggressive or deceptive in ways that eventually destroy their reputation. Strategy is not a license to be a sociopath. It is a tool for managing resources. If you destroy your Tao, your moral alignment, in the process of winning a battle, you have set the stage for your own eventual ruin.
That is a crucial distinction. Sun Tzu was writing for the survival of the state, not just for the ego of the general. If the state is ruined by the war, the general has failed, no matter how many battles he won. This brings us to the idea of risk mitigation. Most people think strategy is about taking big risks to get big rewards, but Sun Tzu is actually very risk-averse.
He is incredibly risk-averse. He says do not move unless you see an advantage, do not use your troops unless there is something to be gained, do not fight unless the position is critical. He wants you to wait until the odds are so heavily in your favor that victory is a foregone conclusion. It is the opposite of the Hollywood version of strategy where the hero makes a desperate one-in-a-million gamble. Sun Tzu would hate that hero. He would say that hero is a fool who got lucky.
It is about the cold, hard math of survival. So, how do we pull this all together for someone who is not leading an army or a Fortune 500 company? How does the average person use this as a mental operating system in 2026?
I think it starts with the audit. The first takeaway is to audit your own Tao. What is your mission? What are you actually trying to achieve in your career or your personal life? Most people are just reacting to the emails in their inbox or the notifications on their phone. They have no Tao. They are just a collection of reactions. If you can define your core mission, you have already gained a massive advantage over everyone else who is just drifting.
That is a great point. And the second takeaway would be to look at your Earth. What is the actual reality of your situation? Not the reality you wish you had, or the reality you tell people about at parties. What are your actual resources, your actual constraints, and your actual competitors? If you are trying to start a business in a saturated market with no unique advantage, you are fighting a battle on unfavorable terrain. Sun Tzu would tell you to move. Find a different hill to occupy.
And the third takeaway is the OODA loop. Practice getting faster at observing and orienting. When something goes wrong, do not just panic. Observe what happened, orient yourself to the new reality, decide on the best move, and act. The faster you can do that, the less power the world has to overwhelm you. It is about becoming anti-fragile, to use Nassim Taleb's term. You actually get stronger from the chaos because you can process it faster than anyone else.
I would also add a fourth takeaway, which is the idea of red teaming your own life. We mentioned episode 893, and I think it is so important. Once you have a plan, ask yourself, how would Sun Tzu defeat me right now? If I were my own enemy, where would I strike? It is a great way to find your own blind spots before the world finds them for you.
It is the ultimate form of self-knowledge. Sun Tzu says that if you know yourself but not the enemy, you have a 50% chance of winning. But if you do not even know yourself, you are just a victim waiting to happen. Strategic thinking is really just a form of extreme responsibility. It is saying that I am responsible for understanding the system I am in and making the best possible moves within that system.
It is a very empowering worldview, even if it feels a bit cold at times. It takes the luck out of the equation as much as possible. You are not just hoping for the best, you are calculating the best. And even when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, you have a framework for how to respond.
It is about resilience. It is about knowing that the heaven and the earth will change, but the principles of strategy will not. Whether it is 500 BC or 2026, the person who understands their environment and their opponent, and who can act with speed and focus, is going to have a massive advantage.
I think that is why the book stays on those shelves. It is a reminder that while the tools of conflict change, the nature of conflict does not. It is always about resources, psychology, and the management of reality. And if you are not managing reality, reality is definitely managing you.
Well said. And look, if you found this deep dive into strategic theory interesting, we have a whole archive of this kind of stuff. We mentioned episode 733 earlier, where we went inside the world of modern war colleges to see how they teach these ancient texts today. It is a great companion to this discussion.
And if you are more interested in the personal side of this, how to use these frameworks for your own mental clarity, definitely check out episode 1030 on Stoicism. There is a huge overlap between the Tao of Sun Tzu and the Stoic archer who focuses on his own aim rather than the target.
We have over 1,200 episodes now, so there's a lot to explore. You can find everything at myweirdprompts.com. We have an RSS feed there if you want to subscribe directly, and all the links to the various platforms.
And for those of you who want to stay updated in real time, we have a Telegram channel. Just search for My Weird Prompts on Telegram. We post every time a new episode drops, so you never miss a beat. It is the fastest way to stay in our OODA loop.
Nice one. Also, we really do appreciate the feedback we get from you guys. If you have been listening for a while and you are enjoying the show, could you take a second to leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify? It genuinely helps the algorithm find new listeners who might be looking for this kind of deep dive content.
It really does. We see every review, and it helps us keep this thing going. So, thank you to everyone who has already done that. And a quick thanks to Daniel for the prompt that got us thinking about Master Sun today. It is always good to revisit the classics.
It definitely is. It reminds you that some things are timeless for a reason.
Alright, I think that is a wrap on this one. I am Corn Poppleberry.
And I am Herman Poppleberry.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We will see you next time.
Until next time, keep thinking strategically.
So, Herman, be honest. If you were a general in ancient China, would you have been the one with the brilliant plan, or the one trying to figure out why the logistics were a mess?
Oh, I would definitely be the logistics guy. I would be the one obsessing over the exact number of grain wagons and the calories needed per soldier per day. You cannot have a brilliant plan if your army is hungry. What about you?
I think I would be the guy hiding in the tall grass, observing the enemy, and waiting for the perfect moment to suggest we just go home because it is too hot.
Typical sloth move. But hey, Sun Tzu would say you were just waiting for the opportune moment.
It is all about the heaven, Herman. It is all about the heaven.
Fair enough. All right, let us get out of here.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Check out myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We will be back soon with another one.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
And remember, all warfare is based on deception. So if you see me acting productive later, I am probably just taking a nap.
I knew it. The ultimate strategic move.
Guilty as charged. See you guys.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth.